gods are physically in the world of my mangas, how do I manage their territories versus the greater world's territory where mortals and gods conflict? Within my manga, The Knight of Slaughter and The Devil's Deal that share the same world, one thing stands true. Everybody wants power. Everybody wants control. Just because, like in real life, we all want to control what we can to live a peaceful life. Whenever I write a story, we have to apply that to every single character, both main, sub, and in the greater lore. And so all these stories literally have characters that are going against each other's wants and desires in order to try to get what they want. Let me show you what I mean. Within the Easterland, there are two gods that rule over this area. We're not talking about Confero, the Gunnar King. We're going to talk about Desolation, god of destruction, and Cypher, goddess of the void, because these two are diametrically opposed to each other's goals, because Cypher ultimately has the goal of sending the world into the void, which in terms of the map is this area, which may not look big until you realize that it is 1,700 miles across, which is basically like going from the furthest point of the west coast of California all the way to the border of Illinois. But for obvious reason, Desolation and some of the other gods have an issue with that, which is why the gods ended up coming up with a compact for her, limiting how much landmass that she can absorb every year. And this was just their way of delaying a war that will eventually have to happen, because she will consume everything. But what about the god of destruction? What does he have to say about the East? Well, back in the time frame of the Deep Stalker Crows, Desolation was pretty much content to stay at Wargast. And that's because Desolation, or Orden as his name was back in the day, because he was the god of battle, his simple purpose for Wargast was to be a mediator for war in the East. Because there were all sorts of kingdoms that were literally vying for power. The precious metal kingdoms are designated by these graphs right here, except down here, all of this is the Osmium Kingdom. And these were kingdoms ran by mortals. But when they desecrated Lady Orgy and killed her, but made the fatal mistake of allowing her to give herself a wish spell, that's when he might have lost his cool a little bit. Because that's when he sent out his legions and began the cleansing. And that basically means that when he goes to a town, he only leaves 10% of his population alive. Everyone else gets rounded up, and it doesn't matter if you're a woman, child, man, old, young, sick. There are no benefits of being any of these conditions, because they literally count numbers and they only take 10%. So in the current time of Devil's Deal, which is 120 years after Knight of Slaughter, even though they're standalone stories, for the most part, the East is pretty barren with the exception of Wargast, the Necro Swamp, and Bayshire, which is Cypher's holy city. And that's because over time, he keeps on culling 10% of 10% of 10% of 10%. So even though he could technically take over the region, because there's not really an occupying force to stop him, he doesn't want that land. He wants to fulfill Lady Orgy's wish. So his population is doing perfectly fine in Wargast, and Cypher's population is living in a utopia in Bayshire. But with Desolation's legions literally purging everything, it makes civilization pretty hard to start up, because you never know when the flags are going to come to your little settlement and cull all but 10%. But go ahead and grab a copy of The Devil's Deal and Knight of Slaughter, because now I have keychains of some of the diamond characters that have been inserted into the lore, like Nina or Corylus.